all the panelists. It seems like art is always on the side of social change and often sort of progressive or liberal agenda. And I was just wondering if everyone could answer maybe why that is, or also give some examples of their experiences of how it's been used for the opposite effect.
Country music. I know, I'm kidding, but I'm actually being a little bit serious. Like, I feel like it all becomes about where you live in the world and what the art's trying to do, because my wife listens to a lot of country, or used to listen to a lot of country music, so sometimes we put it on, and I'll be amazed at how, like, oh my God. Not all of it, but there's a strain of country music that, like, that sort of talks about the good old days and how we have to keep our country, and, you know, and this is not new country, it's country music, that I'm like, that's not the music I grew up with. And I feel like we sort of think that art I think works great to push social change, because the reason why artists create art is because somebody said stop doing what you're doing, and I think that's always sort of trying to push forward. But I think it's a lot of it is perspective. I think it just, the art you take in is the art you take in. I think art is a great way, like Jeff was saying, like everybody's saying, to push social change, because I think there's a direct link between a black president and the fact that there were black presidents in movies for years, like in 24, and in movies they were just like, and the president's black. Wouldn't that be weird? And over time, America was like, I guess that's not weird anymore. You know, and I think there's a direct link between those things happening. You know, so I think it's a great way to do that, but I don't think it's always pushing.
So my question has to do with the kind of the intersection of technology and creativity. I recently read this book by Jaron Lanier called You're Not a Gadget, which, by the way, is a fascinating book for anyone who's interested in these topics, you know, technology, culture, creativity. And Jaron makes this point that we are becoming so dependent on technology that creativity is actually on the decline. And he uses the word of music to illustrate his point, because he's also a musician. And he says, you know, how till the early 90s, about every 10 years, there was a new major style of music, you know, that was coming up, rock and roll, hip hop, you know, before that jazz, gangster music, and so on. But since the 90s, there hasn't really been a major new style of music, you know, that's really new and original. And I would like to pose that really from Jenner through me to you guys as a question. Do you guys agree with that assertion that we're becoming so dependent on technology that creativity is actually on the decline? Which is kind of very counterintuitive if you think about it.
Well, I kind of agree that, you know, technology has definitely sort of changed the way that we are creative. If I were to speak to that specific, example, though, I'd say that what Jaron might be missing in this particular instance is that during the 90s is when the structures of the media changed, and the structures of culture changed. And this is a question I've posed to mostly college-age audiences over the last, 6 years since I've been running around with this book, Can't Stop, Won't Stop. And I say, how many of you know what the 1996 Telecommunications Act is, or was, and did? And every year there's fewer and fewer hands that are raised. And I say, but this has affected culture immeasurably all around the world. Because it basically was a turning point beyond which media companies were not felt, that were the consensus that media was there for democracy was broken. You know what I mean? And now media companies were just like any other companies. They needed to grow, they needed to form monopolies, they needed not to have ownership caps, they needed to be able to become global in order for everybody to feel good, right? And so now we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stations that have micro-targeted us and really, in a lot of ways, taken away the diversity. We've got millions of monocultures now, rather than multiculturalism is what we've got. Multiculturalism used to be a radical word, but after the 90s it wasn't anymore, because it was bottled and now everything is served. Super served is actually the marketing term that they use. And so, in that sense, I feel like the cycle of creativity in music and in other areas has changed because it favors mega stars, it favors large economies of scale, it favors lack of risk, whereas in music you had a really unstable industry. For years upon years, it would be this thing of, oh wow, who's this guy, coming from wherever, and he's kind of shaking his hips funny. Oh God, it's Elvis Presley, on his Sun Records label, independent record label, right? And who are these three guys from New Jersey rapping for 15 minutes on a record? You know what I mean? Oh, it's Sugar Hill Gang on an independent label out of New Jersey called Sugar Hill. And there's no independent labels anymore that can compete at that type of level. Just as the book industry has changed, just as the movie industry has changed, just as the TV industry has changed, there's no middle ground anymore. And so technology is a big part of it, but I think that the economics of it, the structures of it, are what we kind of have to unpack. And that's why, again, I think Occupy is so crucial, it's so important. It's about people saying, no, this is our space, and this is our time, and we're going to be able to create these types of things. Now, if it moves up to a level where people could say, okay, now we understand how we can get to a level of breaking down what was built up by the sort of corporatist attitude over the last 2-3 decades, under a lot of Democrats, as well as Republicans, then that's where the cultural shift will have happened, I think.
Anybody have a question?
I just wonder, and I'm of the older generation, and I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and I think one of the things that happened then is that our brothers and our fathers and our friends were going off to Vietnam, and I think that's what really sparked the protests, was that it wasn't a choice. And so everyone was very deeply affected by it. But I think in terms of art, my son is an electronic experimental music person, and I mean, ironically, the way someone found him, who he's here, was on the internet. And now through that, they've developed a relationship, and they're developing music together. And so I think that it has enhanced in some ways people's creativity, that we can be more connected as a world, and that it's allowed young artists like my son, who might never, or other people I know, my daughter's a photographer, that it's allowed them to connect to the world and in their own creativity in ways that might not have ever happened. You had to be famous, or you had to have someone sponsor you, or to really create art if you were going to be an artist. And I love the idea of, I hate the idea of starving artists. I work with artists a lot, and I think that artists have to pay their bills like anyone else, and people call me and say, oh, can't you get it, do it for nothing? And I'd say, well, do you ask your doctor or lawyer to do it for nothing?
Right. Exactly.
And then I had a woman who I was working with who was a director, and she asked the guy when he wanted her to direct, he says, well, can't you do it, just come and do it? And she says, well, do you ask prostitutes to do it for free? And he stopped dead, and he said, okay, how much do you want? Which I loved. And I think that artists haven't been valued in the same way that everyone else has been valued. And I feel like that's changing, because people are able to create work for themselves in other ways. And I don't know, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the whole art world, and both music. And I think as a comedian, what do comedians make their jokes about everyday life and everything, and that's political. It is, when people say, oh, you don't want to be a political comedian, well, how can you not be? It's like you're looking at the world, you're looking at how people live, you're looking at the tragedies of the world and trying to make light out of it. So it seems like you have no choice as a comedian but to look at really deeply the things that are happening, and then to bring them to people in ways that they say, it opens them. It says, okay, you're right. So anyway, I really appreciate this, the discussion.
Any comments?
Hi. As an artist educator and activist myself, I wanted to ask a question, first paraphrasing KRS-One, who said that hip-hop is not just a form of music, but it's a lifestyle. And one of the things that I struggle with a lot is people often, when they want to talk about arts and activism or arts and social change, they say that art is just a tool for social change. And sometimes I feel personally that that's a difficult line to, or a difficult way to phrase the role of arts and culture in terms of conversation you just, or the panel that you just presented. So I'm curious, how can we talk about arts and social change and activism? How do you tread that line? Or in terms of talking about, do you consider it a tool of social change? How can we talk about it differently? Do you feel that dichotomy as well, where people are saying, well, this is just a thing that we can use towards an end of such and such, rather than being a lifestyle, rather than being something a little bit more holistic? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I say art as a tool for social change, like, it's the same way I would say, like, dialogue would be a tool for social change, or electing your officials is a tool for social change. It's just part of a whole host of things. But I think that, I mean, there are different ways of living your life, and I think if you're living your life in a way that's true and reflective, and you're really taking the time to consider things, to be thoughtful about the world, and you're either doing it through conversations, or you're doing it through, you know, visual work, or you're doing it through performance work. I don't know that it's that wouldn't really be a tool, right? That would then be a lifestyle choice. So maybe, absolutely, it's not just the tool, I don't think, in that context. Yeah.
So I think time to wrap up, and I guess our panelists may be available and hang out a little bit and chat with people in the lobby. And thank you everybody for coming tonight. Really appreciate you turning out. Thank you.